Andy Sims with SDS Digital, and welcome to the fourth video on the Sequarallel sequencer module. And away we go.
In this, the fourth video following the development of the Korg Sequarallel sequencer MIDI to CV module, I'll cover recent changes in the module, composing a basic MIDI sequence to record into the module, adding loop markers, then the actual recording. Then a tip and example of what scenarios don't work well with loop markers if you don't already know. Plus using the automation record feature. You may have noticed the Sequarallel looks slightly different. The original place for the CC1 jack is now an almost dedicated MIDI input jack. I say almost dedicated because it can also accept a standard reset trigger for starting and stopping a sequence. Plus it triggers to jump to different parts of a sequence. The CCs now start where the velocity jacks are. This is because dedicated velocity jacks seem to be a waste of outputs, so on the advice of a fellow wiggler, I changed them into multi-use jacks. They can still do velocity but can be configured to be CC to CV outputs or to be per note compatible with the new MPE format. The remaining CC5 and CC6 are bidirectional, so can be set per sequence or globally to output any MIDI CC's level or pitch bend. As outputs, they can be assigned to control any MIDI CC, no matter if they are part of the recorded sequence or not. This can be useful for changing this filter on a MIDI instrument in the sequence, changing the instrument itself, or even just the level of it. In this video, I do change the cut res filter on an instrument, but via MIDI input. The CC5 and 6 inputs will work in the same way. With the Sequarallel, you can record in any old MIDI file you have gathering dust in the back of your library, or you can compose for it specifically. I find I do a combination of the two, mostly in FL Studio by importing the individual tracks and arranging them to suit the Sequarallel. It's logical to allot musical phrases to the channels you might want to gate through the CV outputs to control VCOs, filters, samples, what have you. Then use the other channels for MIDI exclusive instruments. I usually make 4 channels, then decide what should play through them. Here I am making a simple sequence for this demo video, and perhaps more videos if it sounds okay. I'm careful not to overlap lead-in notes that may not make sense at the start of a loop, if there is going to be a loop there. For the most part, it's not a problem, but swingy compositions can present this problem especially. Once the sequence is finished, you can add some loop markers. These are in the form of note number 121 or C#10. Make sure the markers are at very low level, but not at 0, in case they're played elsewhere. As they quantize to the preceding bar, they should be placed within the bar that the sequence will loop or jump to. Here I am placing them 2 bars apart. They don't need to be spaced evenly, as this depends on your sequence. As the sequence is recorded, these notes will be recognized and converted into loop markers. Now for some percussion. The Sequarallel has a devoted mode for 12 drum triggers, which I'll cover in a different video. There, done. I do a quick check of the proposed loop regions to see how they sound. Notice the pause marker at the end. This is a good thing to add so you don't have to manually stop and possibly be too late or too early. Most DAW sequencers have stop in one form or another. Loops sound good. Some filter tweaking. Sounds good. To record, make sure your software sequencer is queued and ready to play. Press both P and S buttons together to arm. Now hit play on the software. The red LEDs will flash while recording a sequence to memory. It can be recorded at any speed, but if played without a clock input, the Sequarallel will source the clock, and this BPM will be used by default, even though it can be changed. Now to play the sequence. Select the last recorded sequence and load. Here it's number 5. Hit play to start at the next clock. In the release version, hitting the P button will arm for a reset start, so it will need 2 presses to force starting play on a running clock. It can also be armed to start on a clock pulse if the clock is not active at the time the P button is pressed. If you're going to start that way, it's a good idea to shoot a few clocks in beforehand so that rate can be anticipated. Otherwise, it'll use the BPM it was recorded at or the set BPM. This sequence has only 3 loop points, but jump to still makes it interesting. A little. The end of the sequence usually loops, but I had the end loop turned off. This is an option for looping between the last marker and the first marker if it's a pure loop style sequence with no introduction. Well, here's one of those lead-in notes that doesn't make any sense. I put them in to prove the point. Not really. While the sequence is playing, MIDI messages received at the MIDI in jack will merge with the playing sequence. This gives you some deeper control of the sequence. I'll set loop here. I could use my UC33 controller to do this via hardware, but it's more visually obvious to use one of the channels in FL Studio for this video. I'm on the channel that has the rock organ, so I'll modify the way it sounds with these controls. Primarily, I can see this best used with a MIDI controller near the skiff. Hopefully it has lots of knobs like mine. Change the instrument. Any MIDI control will of course modify that channel. Now I'll do some panel transposing, then I'll use MIDI. From the panel is a bit tricky if you're not accustomed to it, but there is an encoder one-step safety lock to prevent accidentally switching to another box, as things can get quite active on the knob during this. As with any bar quantized change, the transpose must be done before the bar, or loop point as shown here. From a MIDI keyboard it's much easier, as you'll see here. By CV input, transposing using another sequencer is probably the easiest, but doing an automation recording releases the user from the drudgery of doing it by hand over and over. That'll be coming up shortly. When the cursor is at the top over the loop quick box, it will display the bar count and beats for reference. I may change the jump to reference from marker count, as it is now, to bar number. It might be more useful that way. The clock out jack is bidirectional. When the sequence is being clocked via MIDI or the Sequarallel itself, you need that clock output. But when there's a clock input, it becomes pretty useless, so switches over to an analog control for lots of functions. Besides the original clock-out CV input control, CC5 and CC6 can also optionally transpose via CV, at 1 volt per octave, of course. Transpose is global, but may have individual channel options implemented before the release. AutoRec is an automation recorder. This will record panel actions while the sequence plays, and is quantized to bar lengths for alignment. The record time can be set from 1 bar to 64 bars, after which it will start playing the automation. This is great for transposing in particular, but can be used with loop on-off, jump to, channel modes, and chord order, or even clock division. AutoRec records changes to the sequence made by the CV input, panel, or the MIDI remote, and are always applied to the next bar. To record changes to the sequence, select AutoRec or Play Auto Quick Box and press to select bars. Scroll to the number of bars you want to record. Let's do all 64 bars. Select AutoRec and press encoder to arm it for the next change you will input. I will start the automation with a panel transpose. AutoRec sequences can also be saved to be used with other sequences, especially useful for transposing progressions. Now I'll enable loop, which is also a recorded automation. The remote quick box is still turned on, so I'll do some transposing from the keyboard. Transposing sequences gives it a 60s feel, don't you think? So I'll turn off the loop. Still 24 bars to go. The automation sequence is sized in bars, but depending on where you started it, it will end in the same position within the last bar, not at bar markers. This means mid-bar starts with a slow sequence will end mid-bar as well. A few more to go. I should have chosen 32 bars for the demo. The cool thing is, if the sequence doesn't evenly divide into the 64 bars, then each cycle will be in a different place. But if I had used the jump to during recording the automation, then that would always align the sequence to a specific bar and cause a repeating progression. So you can go whichever way you like with AutoRec. So, now the automation is playing. This demo sequence is 8 bars, so it does divide evenly, but will cycle 8 times before the automation on it cycles once. If new changes are made, they will stay in effect until an AutoRec event changes them. This is really great for loop control or breaks from a transposition. To stop play, either arm for a new automation or press the S button once. Some types of sequences don't loop well, mostly songs that weren't made with looping in mind. Looping MIDI didn't even exist when this example was composed. So watch me struggle with the loops and jumps. I should have patched in some VCOs because it sounds much better with them. Okay, sounds nice, but nope. Lastly, in this video, I'll show you the clock out analog CV input controlling jump 2 points. Clock out, as mentioned earlier, is one of the 3 control inputs that can be assigned per sequencer song to a variety of sequencer controls and MIDI controls. My favorite little sequence for the Sequarallel. Us programmers haven't much time to compose, so I'll patch in a CV sequence to start. The jumps are going to markers, but if there were no markers, it would jump to bars. Markers are more predictable as there can only be 8 maximum and every 0.5 volts will find the next. Here's jumping using an LFO, which is not synchronized to the sequence. So you can see how very useful just this one input configuration is. Another nice thing is that all of these settings, including most of the global settings, can be saved to the sequence, so the next time it is loaded, all of those settings will be as they were left. On Power Up, the last saved global settings load without loading a sequence, so it's always a fresh start for recording a new sequence. I hope you have enjoyed this more intimate look into the Sequarallel module. If so, don't forget to hit the like button thumb thingy. I'm Sandy Sims. Keep on patching!